Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very happy to be here at this venue and that Mr. Wedeveld invited me to come over here and to give a sort of testimony of the experiences I have with the nephrostomy patches. So I'm not a distributor, as Steve Bierman already explained, but I'm here as a patient with a nephrostomy who needs the patches constantly. I was more than happy to come over, as I'm convinced that more people should be informed of the advantages of using the patches and how they can improve the quality of your life. I apologize first for having to sit down and read from my text. Chemotherapy does more to you than just diminish the tumor. But I got complimented that I'm looking well, so you know the saying, there's more to it than meets the eye, which in my case is to be taken literal, as I have a nephrostomy in my right side kidney. There's a tube of about 1 meter hanging onto it, and then a drainage bag which is strapped to my leg, all conveniently covered up, of course. I've had this nephrostomy for about 3.5 years already, and I don't know whether to call it providence, but anyway, at the time when the insertion point was very, very painful and was severely scarred, I learned about the patches that Bedal produces. And in case you should wonder what caused this nephrostomy, well, 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and after a complicated Whipple operation, one of the ureters was destroyed when the doctors tried to remove as many cancer cells as possible around the pancreas already. So it was an unfortunate mistake that this ureter was destroyed, but I'm grateful because I'm still here, alive and kicking, and able to tell you my story. With the ureter gone, a catheter had to be inserted to drain the kidney, and at the same time was fixated with stitches. Now, in theory, such a catheter has to be replaced every 6 weeks, so it could be 4 or 8. But in my case, sometimes it didn't even last for 2 weeks because the catheter or the catheter had moved and caused too much pain, or there was a kinking in the drainage. You can imagine what the insertion point looked like after a couple of switches. It was all reddish, as you can see on the slide, reddish, swollen, infected, and extremely sensitive, especially after every switch. These stitches also involved that I wasn't very mobile the first couple of days after the switch. Because the skin was so sensitive and I was afraid to move, so I had to stay in bed for a couple of days, or I was feeling nauseous of the sedation. So, in fact, it was a very fortunate coincidence that in 2021, the urologist I was seeing had heard of the drain patches, and he brought me into contact with Fabian at Bedal, Belgium at the time. Fabian was one of the few people who gave me some useful tips and information on the materials available for patients like me to make my life a bit more comfortable. Information I did not get when leaving the hospital. So you feel a bit left out. I didn't know which materials were available on the market at the time, so I had to search the internet. When Fabian explained that the patches would make the stitching superfluous, there was no doubt in my mind anymore, and I was more than prepared to act as a sort of test case. But the doctors treating me, they still had their doubts, and they suggested at first a combination of the two, and the stitches and a patch. But it felt good. It felt more secure with the patch, and the risk of the catheter being moved or pulled out was minimized. Because even when pulled or when I accidentally got hooked onto something, I always felt the draw on the patch first, and then you automatically freeze and you refrain whatever you're doing. And believe me, this situation, it happens more often than you would think, especially in summer when you're wearing skirts or shorts and you're doing some chores in the house or in the garden. Or at night. We have the slides here where you can see the combination of the drain patch and the stitches, and then what it looked like after a couple of days. Maybe we can switch to the slide with the drainage bag, the night drainage bag. Yeah, that one. So what can also happen at night, I have this night drainage bag hooked onto the bed. What also can happen is that it accidentally falls down on the floor when you toss or turn in your sleep, and then you feel the pull as well on the patch. Or during the day, and we can have the slide of the stocking, the drainage bag. Yes. So I'm wearing a kind of stocking on my leg to sustain the drainage bag during the day. So this can accidentally drop out of the bag. It's not so heavy as the night bag, but it can drop out, especially when trying to empty it. I felt really so secure with the patches that I did not go for the larger format, which is this one, but I chose to use the smaller format, this one. Why? Because I was a bit afraid that maybe I would get a rash or an irritation underneath the patch, but I had neither. So the result was surprising. It went beyond my expectations. No more sedation necessary, no more stitching necessary, which was very important to me. No more feeling sore for a couple of days after the switch and be more mobile. No more kinking of the catheter. That didn't happen anymore when I had the patch. So to me, this is the ultimate proof that the patches should be given priority than the stitching. We all treasure our freedom, you and I. We have our spare time to go do and see things and enjoy whatever we would like to do. But I was restricted to stay at home because the nursing team had to come round every day or every other day with the stitching. So the patches made my life more flexible and provided me with more free time. Now the nurses only come round maybe once a week to change the bandages or to change the patch. I can even go on holiday or take a break for a couple of days, even come to a convention like this one now, without having to provide someone who can give me the medical care I need. Another advantage is that I have to spend less time in hospital because the replacement of the catheter now involves only maybe half an hour at the most. Instead of having to stay in a hospital bed for about half a day and to be taken to the operation room for doing the stitches and all that, which is not only time-saving, but also important from a financial point of view, I think, depending on the hospital insurances in the different countries. Now, I don't know whether you can fully imagine what it means to me mentally and physically, these patches. But I feel so good now that the scar slowly healed and was less painful. I felt reassured that the catheter would stay well fixed in the patch, and this encouraged me to do sports again and resume part of the life that I led before. I can go to the gym now, I can play paddleball, low level, I admit, but it makes me feel normal again, being able to do things just like everyone else and not being considered the patient who has to take it easy or has to be careful all the time what you do. 2021. I'm sure you all remember the COVID lockdowns. Well, for me, that period was partly a blessing because now Fabian had ample time to do the follow-up. He was there every day, instructing the nursing team on how to position the patch correctly, not too close, not too far away from the insertion point. The nurses were equally amazed by the result. So that's why it's still so hard for me to understand why some doctors are so reluctant to change to the patch system, but want to stick to the traditional system of this stitching. Whereas from a patient's point of view, as was already pointed out, I think the choice should be obvious and the patient's comfort should get priority. This situation also implicates that at present I have to go to a hospital about 70 kilometers away from my home to get the catheter changed, instead of being able to go to a hospital in my hometown, very nearby. Even in case of emergencies, can you imagine when something happens and your kidney gets blocked that you have to be taken to a hospital 70 kilometers away? And I did try it once. I went to the local hospital, but the medical staff in the emergency room, they had never seen the patches before. And I tried to tell them what to do, but they wouldn't take any instructions from me, being a patient, and especially a patient without any medical background. So Fabian had to come in again. I called him, even it was past midnight already. So he intervened and he explained to the medical staff what to do. And to him, they would listen. I was very grateful, or they would have stitched me up again. Since end of 2022, I'm using the flex patches. You've heard about the advantages already. And well, as it turned out, the clip in the drain patches, which is of a harder plastic material, it tended to flatten and block the catheter, a catheter of French 9. So I tested them with the French 10 so far. It goes up to French 11, but to French 10 I've tested it and it goes without any problems. Here you can see the patches with the flex patches. So when comparing both systems, you can easily see that the flex patches are made of a softer material, and they're a lot flatter than the ones with the clip. So now I can go to bed and sleep on either side. I can toss and turn in my sleep, and I can end up on the patch without waking up. So that's a very good feeling. This wasn't the case with the drain patches, and certainly not with the stitches. Then I had to make sure to keep immobilized in bed. I had lots of pillows supporting me, making sure I didn't move and could sleep only in one position, which isn't the case now. Now I can move in my sleep, sleep on both sides without waking up. And I don't think I have to convince any of you, if you have a good night's sleep and an uninterrupted sleep, how different you feel the next day. For all of the good reasons I've mentioned here, I would like to conclude that more doctors, more patients need to be convinced of the advantages of the patch system, which means that you all have an important mission to fulfill. A mission to make sure that the comfort and the well-being of so many patients should get priority. Then the whole purpose of my being here is achieved. You can see here a summary of all the elements I've mentioned, all the advantages. And I do hope that more people can become aware of these advantages. So that's your important task. I would like to thank you all for your patience and listening. Thank you to the Bidal management for inviting me over, and special thanks to Fabian for his enduring assistance all the time.